Hello, friends and listeners, those who are watching the video. Welcome to the Bincast, where small talk comes to die. I am sitting here with Taha. Taha, welcome to the Bincast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Taha, let me start off by asking, when and how did you come to be familiar with me?
Oh man, it was a while back ago.
Okay,
Over just TikTok, over the For You page, I saw a video or two of yours,
yeah.
and I immediately was like, this guy's awesome, and just seeing the work that you do in Uber, so I immediately hit the follow button. I had to.
Amazing. Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. And then from there, you started joining me on my lives as well, and that's how I got more
Yes.
acquainted with you. Because I mean, I've got a lot of followers, but not as
Yeah.
many come on the live sessions, right?
Hmm.
And then there's quite a few on the live there whom I still don't know as well as I'd like to know. But then there's those who start, messaging and asking and participating a lot more, and that's how I saw your
Yeah.
name coming up more often. I'm like, hey, who is this guy? I'd love to know, get to know him better.
Yeah, I tried to join the lives as much as I could, but a lot of times I had class calls that come in conflict, but I tried to
Yeah,
join as much
sure.
as I could.
It's a tough thing, like scheduling the live that is going to be feasible for so many time zones around the world. Around the
Yeah.
world, like so. Taha, let's give our listening audience some background on you. Give us some background on where you live, where you're at in life right now, what is important for you, how old you are. Yeah, give us some background insight into
Awesome.
you.
Awesome. My name is Taha. I'm 17 years old. I turned 18 in January, so coming up. I live in Calgary, Alberta, as well.
Yep.
Um, right now, I think one of the most important things for me that I'm trying to focus on is school. I am in my last year, grade 12.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I'm really trying to focus on. And other than that, yeah.
Awesome. Have you always lived here in Calgary?
No,
You
I
haven't.
just
Okay.
moved here about a year ago.
A year ago. And where was
Yes.
home before here?
Fort McMurray, Alberta.
So way up north.
Way up north. Yeah, for about 10, 11 years.
Okay. And before that,
Toronto.
Toronto. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so you were pretty young when you moved out to Alberta.
Yeah.
What is it like growing in a northern community?
I like it because I feel like, with a small town like Fort McMurray, you kind of like you click automatically right away with a ton of people. You make friends easily, and you know everybody really. Like I could walk around at every corner of a store, I'll
Yeah.
see somebody that I know. Right? It's a small.
Yeah. So since you've moved to Calgary, have you been missing Fort McMurray all the more, or are you quite happy here in Calgary now?
I I'm quite happy here. I'd have to say, though, I do still miss it just because I feel like city life is very different than a town life, and
Yeah.
people here are very different. I feel like a lot of people here, like you have your friend group and that's who you're with, or you're kind of just by yourself. You
Right.
kept yourself. So city, when it comes to people, it's definitely different, but I love it here. There's a lot more opportunities here than there was up in Fort Mac.
Absolutely. So I can relate with you in a couple of ways in that I've grown up since I moved to Canada in some very small communities and some bigger than small, but it's all I haven't been in a city dynamic since I moved to Canada. But I've come to know over the last few years that I very much love being in the city. And so in comparison to where I've been before, I love being in the big city. Although Calgary isn't really a big city per se, is it?
It's not big, but I think it's good enough to call it
It's
big, I
big enough,
guess.
yeah. A lot of people I talk to love being here. A lot of the guys that I drive on an ongoing basis are usually on flight up to work in Fort Mac, and so um, I can tell from their experience they love coming back to Calgary because
Yeah.
Fort Mac has this appearance of just work, 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 right?
It's really a work town. It's all about work because it's the heart of the oil sands.
Hmm.
I mean, like, and I feel like it's kind of like a place where like it's nice to go up there and visit for a couple days or a week or two. But
Hmm.
Calgary is a nice place to come back to.
Was it just you who moved down here, or did you move down with your family?
My whole family moved down
Your
here.
whole family. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And it's your last year of school now, you were saying.
Yes.
How difficult is it navigating your final year in the midst of a pandemic?
Man, I find it kind of hectic, very hard, especially because I'm online. Calgary Board of Education didn't really do such a good job with the online, and the way
Mm.
my classes are set up. I only have one core this year, so it's a bit tough, and but I'm getting through it. Hopefully, semester is
Okay,
already almost over, so
that's crazy, isn't it?
time passing by. Yeah.
So with the end of the semester coming up, does that imply that you have exams on the horizon?
Um, we should be doing diplomas, but by the we're hopefully I know there's petitions, there's talks out there about getting those voluntary or can completely canceled. But apparently they're monitoring the situation. So
I see,
they
I
say,
see. My goodness, it's such an uncertain season, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
Now, are you just trying to get through this year, or do you already have plans for what happens after this year?
I do have plans for post-secondary.
Okay,
Yes.
and what does that look like for you?
Um, so in the terms of where my classes are due to having health issues and all that, I don't have the right classes 100% for university, so I might upgrade.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm looking at Carleton University to study law,
Okay.
and I look at Ontario because they have a program, a support program that will help me jump into university faster.
Okay. Law is quite a wide field. Do you have
Yeah,
a specific area you're honing for, or are you
uh,
just saying law in general for now?
political science,
Political science.
and then law
Okay.
school.
And then law school. So why that sequence?
So with to get into law school, you need a an undergraduate degree,
Yeah.
and you can do an undergraduate degree in anything. It doesn't have to be something related to law. It could be engineering or whatever. But I just feel
Okay.
like it's better to study something that has to do with law and politics, just so I can get the foundations of it in my
Sure.
undergrad, and
Yeah.
then get onto law school.
What is it about law that fascinates you or intrigues you that you're saying, I want to
Um, I love debates.
ah,
I love to debate topics and all that sort of stuff. And so,
okay. Are you the kind of person that looks for playing the devil's advocate just to see how well robustly an idea or an argument is formulated?
mhm. I I look at multiple options and stuff. So.
Okay, okay. Intriguing, intriguing. Are you an only child, Taha, or do you have many siblings?
Many siblings. I have three other
Many.
siblings.
Okay. And where do you fit amongst your siblings?
The second of the
Okay.
family.
Okay. So the second out of four, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Gotcha. Have you had the chance to test out your debating skills with your siblings, or do your conflicts take other forms that are physically inclined?
Um, I have had the chances to sometimes with my dad and my brother, maybe over kind of breakfast or just as breakfast is being made, news will
Yeah.
be on.
Yeah.
For example, something with our prime minister a couple months ago, or the upcoming election and stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we kind of debated a little bit on where like point of views and what we think will happen and all that and why.
Okay. Okay. Fascinating. So, interesting question is, do you have like, are those who are who are those who enjoy debating, would you say they're primarily extroverts, or can they be introverts as well and still engage robustly?
Um, I think it depends. I guess I could say. I don't know. I've never really thought of that.
Yeah,
Um, but I think maybe it depends on the person's views and beliefs, possibly.
gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Um, now you are approaching 18 years old, you're saying. When's your birthday, by the
Yes.
way?
January 25th.
Oh, so it's coming up just around the corner.
Yep.
So approaching 18 years old, do you feel like you are do you feel like you're transition how can I say this? Do you feel like you're being treated like a man now, like a fellow responsible adult, or do you still sense that you are like a teenager and being treated as such by culture in general?
I a little bit of both. I think it depends. Like when it comes to culture wise, in our culture, like I know in the Western world, 18 normally people move out and all that stuff. See, in my
Hmm.
culture, we don't have that.
Yeah,
Moving out. It's kind of when you get married, then you can
I
move
see.
out. In terms of things like medical appointments and all that, once you turn 18, a lot of it comes on to me. I have to
Mhm.
schedule, make appointments, and I have to be the one that's answering questions to doctors and
Mhm.
communicating with them. Versus a lot of the times it's my parents do that for me.
I see. I see. You mentioned your culture, and that was one of the things I wanted to get to. What is your culture? What ethnic background do you come from?
I'm Lebanese.
Lebanese. Fantastic. You guys have quite a history, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Lebanese. Which means you speak Arabic, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Does that make you a bilingual, trilingual? Where are you?
Bilingual.
Bilingual, okay. So
I
not
tried
really
to learn
French.
French.
Yeah.
I tried to learn French once, but it didn't really work out. So I might, but that's something I want to do later on in
Gotcha.
university. So
Okay. Now, were you born in Toronto?
yes,
You were, okay. Were all your siblings born here in Canada?
yeah, all of them.
Okay. And does that mean it was your mom and dad that came here initially, or was it your grandparents?
My parents.
Your parents. Gotcha. What has life been like for you in your experience as a first generation?
I feel like I mean for me it's been kind of easy, kind of hard. I feel like it's keeping your culture, those beliefs of this is right, this is wrong, but then being surrounded by this Western ideology of like, you do this, you got to do this, and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And trying to balance those out. For example, when it comes to drinking and smoking and all that sort of stuff, that's forbidden for us.
Hmm.
Um, but we live in a time right now where that's everybody really does that. So it's kind of hard sometimes to. I feel like
Hmm.
some people have this issue to separate themselves from that world.
Hmm. Hmm. Did that cause confusion for you in your younger years? This
Um,
trust.
my younger years, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I'd say it did, but then I looked into it. Like I didn't do any of this stuff, but I looked into a lot of it, and I realized
Mhm.
the the bad effects that these certain things can have on you and what this does to people, and that just kind
Sure.
of made me stay away from it even more.
Gotcha, gotcha. I can relate with you on so many levels that way. I was first generation here and also like um an immigrant as well too.
Yep.
So I was 8 when I moved here. I found for me the point of confusion, a huge part of it was trying to understand how these two diverse cultures could play well with each other because they just seem to do a lot more of this,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Yeah, you can relate that way too.
Yeah.
And so in my experience, it was more like, okay, I know in my home, it's this one culture that's being expressed, and here's like the expectations are of this one culture,
Hmm.
but these expectations and ways of operating do not fly outside the home in this Canadian culture. And so I was having to play like dual roles, like outside the home. I had to remind myself, okay, don't say this or act this way because this is what is normal out here. But then going back home, I had to switch gears in my mind and say, okay, where am I
Yeah.
at right now? Sometimes that caused
Hmm.
tension. What would you, if you could have a chance to talk to immigrant parents coming in who have children or who are going to have children, What helpful advice would you give for them to help their kids make that adjustment a little more smoother?
I think really just really keep to your culture, to your religion, as much as possible. There's going to be times in your lifetime that you're going to come across and clash with this Canadian world, um, but you always have to remember who you are and where you came from.
Mm, gotcha. Now, along those lines, remembering who you are and where you came from, you've been here for all your life, and yet you lived in two different cultural dynamics,
Mhm.
which have influenced you and who you are today, which is, yeah, a unique blend that is you, Taha. If I were to ask you to give a percentage of how much you feel you're Canadian and how much you feel you're Lebanese, how would that pan out in your experience and how you think it is?
How much of a Canadian I am? I wouldn't say I'm that much. I feel like especially with my age group right now, there a lot majority of them are out, in parties and all this sort of thing. Um, you know, parties and hanging out with friends and all that sort of stuff. So I say when it comes to my Canadian side, even though I was born here and lived here my whole life, I wouldn't say it is as strong as my Lebanese side. I my faith and all that.
Cool. So you still very much feel strongly as a Lebanese,
Yeah.
even though there's Canadian expressions in there. That's pretty amazing. So that means like your community had a very strong influence in your development up and growing up. And now, did you have a really solid Lebanese community up in Fort Mac, or was that non-existent?
No, it was a pretty solid community. There's
Amazing.
a big one, yeah.
I would not have guessed that. That's amazing. And of course, there was that in Toronto, right?
Hmm.
Now, tell me, is this true? Like I've heard from some of my riders that in Toronto they believe they're the center of Canada. Is that correct?
Now, even though I haven't lived there in a while, I still talk to
Sure.
people from there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still do believe like they feel like they are, even though Ottawa's the nation's capital. Toronto kind of they feel like they have it. They have it there.
Well,
They even have their own slang and everything.
in Toronto,
Yeah.
do you remember any of it?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I
shucks.
can't remember any of it.
I know I used to live in a really tiny city in Saskatchewan before I moved back here, Prince Albert, and they have their own slang, which is unique. It's only like used in Prince Albert, and so I find that fascinating how that evolves, right? It's amazing. One of the things I experienced since I moved to Canada again was we never actually moved to a big city like Toronto or Vancouver. And had we done so, Taha, I think something would have evolved where we would have found more people from our country and we would have been in community with them. Perhaps my influence of my culture would have been even stronger cemented then. Not to say that my parents didn't try to implement and institute that in my home, but I think it would have been more in influential perhaps. But we moved to smaller towns and cities that didn't have any other Ethiopians where I was living in. And so it was like me and my family and then the rest of the community.
Everyone.
So yeah, so that was my experience. A little bit different from yours that way. Let me see if you agree with this. Now, I'm intentionally bringing up things that you can, by all means, feel free to debate me on.
Okay.
Um, it seems though, when I watch a lot of immigrants coming here, they usually move like to the bigger cities where they can find like-minded individuals from their countries, from their cultures. But what tends to happen is they start, you know, it's almost like they've never left home because they're in a new country, but still within their own cultural climate, which seems to slow down the process of them integrating into the community and with other cultures around, right? And my experience is more like where we didn't have anyone who was like us, and so we had a faster track process to getting to
Yeah.
know those outside of our cultural context. Um, do you do you see that same trend? And if you do you think it's helpful? If not, why not?
I do see that. I see that. Like when I talk to if it's family back home or anything, the first thing when they hear Canada, the first thing that comes to their mind is Toronto,
Mhm.
or Ontario in general. It's
Right.
well known, a big city.
Yeah.
A lot of people start off in that in Ontario a lot of the times in those
Mhm.
big cities, and I feel like that's it's a good thing because there's a lot more of their you'll probably find a lot more of your culture in those big cities right away, and then once you kind of get comfortable, then people transition to other cities or small towns.
I saw that too when I was in Saskatchewan. It seemed like the government was really encouraging those immigrants coming in to choose rural areas in Canada. So they're saying, come out to Saskatchewan, don't stay in Ontario or don't go to Vancouver.
Yeah.
Come out to these lesser traveled to spots and make your home there. And if you decide to do so, we're going to kick in some incentives for you as well. So that drew more into these other areas, even though they still have found their pockets to just spend time with, right?
Yep.
Um, so you also mentioned your faith. What faith do you subscribe to?
Islam.
Islam. Okay. Arabic, Islam. So like Muslim then.
Yes.
Fantastic. Um, since you've been in Canada, or sorry, since you're growing up in Canada, I wanted to ask you a bit more about evidences, if you've experienced them, of discrimination, biases towards yourself personally or towards your community with reference to your faith or to your culture. Have you experienced those? What has that been like on the landscape that has been your experience?
I haven't experienced anything personally or anything like that. I think the one nice thing about Fort McMurray is we were a small town, so everybody was welcomed and everybody loved each other. When the mosque would hold certain, events or anything like that, for
Mhm.
um, you wouldn't just see Muslims out there. You'd see
Mhm.
Christians, you see Jewish, you'd see everybody from the community. They all come together as one. So
Amazing.
that's a nice thing about that town, is that everyone comes together um, as one, and we all work together and help each other.
Really cool. What's one of the biggest misrepresentations in relation to your faith that you hear often?
I'd have to say that we're bad, or our faith is all a lie, or we're all terrorists. Those kind of things. What I
Gotcha.
hear.
Yeah, yeah. I never really clued into this point here until I was driving two guys from Iraq, two young guys. They were here as students in university. They had a very strong accent, which was from the Middle East, of course. Um, but it all didn't occur to me, Taha. I was thinking about them here in this culture, potentially watching our forms of entertainment. And in a lot of our films and a lot of our movies, we feature those from the Middle East origins as the antagonists, right? And I never really thought about that until I was driving these guys. And so I asked them about what their perception is as they're living right amongst us and as we're watching these videos that castigate or puts their ethnic background in the crosshairs of this perception. And then it got me to trying to understand what that's doing at some subconscious level for our community here in North America in the way that we see these individuals potentially without ever giving them that
Mhm.
right to be seen as innocent before being proven guilty just because of their background, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it definitely has. There's a lot of different opinion, but I think the majority of one is when a lot of people, especially that come here new to Canada, they see that Muslims are the antagonists in these movies, and for some people, it hits them really hard that
Mhm.
happens. But then for some people, they're like, oh, it's just a movie, but then it hits hard at home.
Yeah, because at some level, unless those who are watching these forms of media are able to intentionally say this is a story narrative here, but I'm not going to take the implications of the storyline and put them in real life. If we're not intentionally doing that, like it's not too hard to coast into that level of just saying guilt by association, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Taha, what would you say in the midst of a very busy life that you're currently living as a student, in the midst of your studies and so on, if you were to say you had time to devote to a cause that you're really passionate about, what would that be?
Oh, good question. To a cause, I
Mm,
think one thing I'd look into in terms of foundations and all that is something like a diabetic type foundation. Um, just because I've seen people struggle with that, and there is no really cure for that, and I also struggle with that myself.
hmm
Um, I feel like it's the one thing that's kind of not put off 100%, but like in the dark with a lot of things, just because people see that as, okay, you can't eat too much sugar and all, that's it, right? And the mental health as well. Mental health is something huge. That stigma that we have of, men don't go through these certain mental health issues is a problem that that stigma, we need to get rid of that as soon as possible.
hmm When did you get on this bandwagon of saying men need to be a lot more open and vulnerable about tending to their mental health? When did that shift happen for you where you're like, oh, this is on my radar now?
I think in my early teens.
In your early teens.
I think so,
So,
yeah.
so you're not necessarily new to this at all then.
No, no.
In the midst of growing up through your teens, which is usually a confusing season for a lot of teens, how has your own growth evolved in this area as you tended to your own personal health, mental health? And then how has that been as you interact with your peers, as you're seeing their reception or lack thereof in relation to mental health?
Like I did, like you said, it's teenage years are very difficult years for a lot of people. So
Yeah,
I did struggle with mental health issues a little bit.
yeah.
Um, but I think talking to people wasn't really my thing, and I
Mhm.
feel like it's not really a lot of people's. But I did, and I tried my best to implement different type of lifestyle things. For example, having a task planner every day, and making sure I get up and I get ready 100% in the morning as if I was going out.
hmm
These certain things to help me, and I've seen that type of stuff help other people, and I recommend it to some people sometimes too, and I see it happen because there's something about when you're in that state of mind, like not a good state of mind, just getting up and getting ready, getting dressed, doing your hair and all that, you feel good about yourself in a way.
hmm
I don't know how that works, but I've seen it work and all that.
Are you familiar with a guy named Jordan Peterson?
It's not Jordan. I've heard the last name around, but I don't first name.
Okay. He's a former professor. I think yeah, he's a former professor at University of Toronto, I believe. And he made big news when he refused. I think there's a clip of him refusing to use pronouns that were mandated from him. Like it wasn't that he was personally opposed to doing it on a personal basis with individuals, but just the fact that you would be mandated to use them. Anyway, he's a philosopher who's made some significant headway. In his book, 12 Rules of Life, one of those rules that he said was make your bed first thing every day. And that
Yeah,
was to fulfill again that thing that you were just describing
that
there.
number one.
Yeah, just as a way of saying, get that momentum going of accomplishment in the day and start off with this as a significant start for all the rest of the things you might have to accomplish in the course of the day. Hmm. That's cool. So I appreciate hearing that that's on your radar, mental health. Would you say mental health is a lot more accessible to people today?
Um, I still feel like it's not 100%
Okay.
to certain people. Maybe not here exactly in Canada, but I feel like especially down south in the state, it's not accessible, and a lot of people can't access it in terms of insurance and all that sort of stuff, and so they just decide to deal with it on their own, which is not good.
I'd probably say from my vantage point, I think it's more on the radar, and yet the majority are not taking benefit of it. So maybe it's more accessible by way of resources on YouTube or on social media, and maybe people are in word more open to talking about the importance of it. But I think the place that people are at mentally still is still at a very fragile place where they're still
Mm.
struggling with some pretty deep stuff, and most aren't reaching out for that kind of help. And so I think that's why there's a lot more work for those who are in therapy, like the therapists or social workers or psychologists. These individuals in these careers have significant work ahead of them still as they help the, the, their clients that come seek help that way.
Yeah, I think definitely go seek help rather than social media, because if you are on social media, you really gotta watch out what you're reading on social media. You don't know what's true and what isn't. And I think one
Mhm.
thing is from what I've heard personally from surroundings, is that people don't see therapists because they believe they're talking by the books and not from the heart, or they're
Ah,
talking for the money, or they're talking for the money, not from the heart type thing.
sure.
Which is why a lot of people apparently they don't go see or they don't like to. So
Yeah, I think you're right on that one there. And also maybe because perhaps they may have tried it once and they just didn't find the right fit the first time. And so they were turned off by the opportunity to see what that looks like for themselves, right? Instead of knowing that they had that opportunity to say, maybe this is not the right fit, but I'll keep on looking till I find the right fit of a person that is able to
yeah.
serve me at that point, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. You can't. A lot of people can't just go to any therapist. You really got to find one that you can sit with and be comfortable with and trust, because you're telling them your life story.
Hmm. Hmm. But then here's the thing, how can they do that when they haven't found a model how to like communicate what their needs are, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the, the reason that they're there in the first place is maybe because there's some block of actually expressing themselves. And maybe there hasn't been that modeling out there. So when they try the one time with someone who should know, but they don't connect with that person, then they're like, well, I give up kind of thing, as opposed to, I'll keep looking and trying to define what it is I'm looking for. I mean, they may sound good, but I just didn't feel the right fit with them. So I'm going to keep on looking, just that
Mm-hmm.
permission at least would be
Yeah,
really nice.
I think that's on the therapist side of really
Client.
understanding, really
Mm,
understanding the client, that they might not have had that modeled in their life, or like a father figure or a mother figure to really help them with these issues. So you really
mm.
got to get down on your client's level and understand them from the heart.
Yeah. Since you have devoted quite a few years in your teen years to attending to mental health and what that means, not only in community, but also for yourself personally, what would you say are some significant areas of growth you've seen in yourself personally because of your participation and involvement with tending to your mental health?
Really just man, I've seen like over I'd say even over the past 2 years alone, I've seen a lot of growth. Obviously, it's hard, you always kind of fall back down a little bit.
Hmm.
But for me, I try to affirmations, like positive affirmations,
Hmm.
all these sort of things. Having a planner, plan out my day, plan out what this is gonna look like, and really knowing what for example, anxiety, what does this look like, and how to work with it, instead of letting it take over and just me sitting on the couch there and doing nothing. How can
Hmm.
I get over it and work over it? For example, me I go for walks. I'm a photographer, so I love taking pictures of nature and stuff.
Yeah.
So I do that to kind of relax myself. And so just finding what works best for you when you're in those situations is
Hmm.
very important.
Very cool. Have you found that your ability to talk to others about ways that you've struggled has also increased in relation to your own growth and your mental health?
I think it's sometimes you find it difficult
Yeah.
to talk to people about the big struggles. But then I remember that you know it's better to talk to somebody and get it out there, because if I don't, it's just gonna build up in my brain, and then one day it's just all gonna burst out, and that's really not healthy at all. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. I've definitely experienced that before.
Mhm.
Better out than in. And yet it's always a challenge. And I think for me, the biggest thing that helped, Taha, is being in a community that modeled what this could look like, talking about these things, practicing these things. And yeah, my time in the 12-step program has been invaluable. Like I really appreciate those that I met there, those that I interacted with, those that sort of were, no, they weren't sort of, they were very vulnerable, but they did it tactfully, they did it in a way where I was like, this is not awkward. And I totally know what they mean as they share their story because I can see myself in their story and I can see how they are progressing in their own experience of growth, of attending to and becoming better versions of themselves. I find that really, really helpful in my context. Um, Mental health is one of those things, though, would you agree, that is not as much focused on in developing countries?
Yeah, I'd say so. I could agree on that.
Um, and so I know, like in my cultural background or cultural context, it's just not one of those things that's even acknowledged saying, forget that. It's just very black and white, right? In your community, culturally, have you found that it is one of those struggles, or is there moves even within your community that are addressing and saying, this is something that's worth talking about?
I think a lot of people can empathize. A lot of Middle Easterns, or if you're from a Middle Eastern country, there is that stigma there. Not just when it comes to men, but both men and women. There is quite that struggle with talking to some people, even with their own parents, or just
Mhm.
anyone.
Sure.
Really, that's something that really needs to be worked on.
Yeah. And it's not an easy engagement, is it? Like you're kind of
No.
pushing against the tide.
Hmm.
Tactfulness is so necessary, but
Yeah.
sometimes we just don't have enough tact.
Yeah.
uh, um, Tell me about the biggest influence in your life, Taha. The biggest influence, like just talking to you, I'm enjoying it. You're very articulate. You're well,
Thank you.
like your reasoning capacities are really competent. And of course, I guess they need to be heading where you're heading. Biggest influence in your life that's made you who you are today. Who would you attribute that to?
That's kind of a hard field for me, but if I had to pick
Mm.
at least one person, I'd probably say um, my dad. Probably, I think, just
Okay.
because I've seen him come here and study and work at the same time and raise kids and go through all these struggles, and even until today, um, even though like obviously he has his business, I don't want to push and get into it into
Hmm.
his business, but I ask him about certain things just so that I can remind myself that like this is what he's been through, this is what he goes through. Like if he can do all that, then why can't I? Like
Hmm.
I look up to my dad a lot.
That's really cool. So, what does he do for his business?
He's a geotechnical engineer.
Oh, wow. Okay. Significant post in that way.
Hmm.
So that's no small study while handling being a dad and earning an
Yeah.
income for the family. Okay. After 17 years here and experiencing it in two different cultural contexts, what are some things you think that your culture gets right? And in some areas, your culture, you'd say, needs to bring some attention to. And then by contrast, what would you say are some things you've noticed the Canadian culture gets really well, but then other expressions that you say, I'd like to bring more attention if I had the opportunity to them?
I think the one thing that we just talked about in my culture and bringing
Yeah.
mental health, more talk about the struggles with mental health. I think one thing good. I think really that understanding, I guess, each other in a culture alone. With Canadian culture, I think one thing that needs to be more focused on, I think, is that I feel like because we all come from different backgrounds. Now, I've never experienced it and I've never seen it, but I know in a lot of places, people don't understand each other. I think we need to really understand each other a lot more. You know, there's people who he comes to work, he has a smile on his face, he works the whole entire day, but in his mind, what he sees is, war, for example, let's say from escaping from war, and so really watching what you say and what you do because that could trigger some emotions for people.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. What do you think is the biggest missing link for humans today in general? You're heading into a field of law where it thrives off of discord or, you know, disagreements amongst humans. What would you say is the biggest thing that would help humans do better at connecting?
Do better at connecting. I feel like one thing is really, especially now in this generation, this society, everyone's on their phones, everyone's on social media. You know, social media shows a wide variety of things. You know, you'll hear some things about this culture, this religion, all that. I think that we really got to take a break from really looking at social media for this kind of information and really just go and talk one-on-one with somebody who may be Middle Eastern or American or something, really understand, you know, what's going on there. Because, you know, you never know what you can trust on social media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that new feature on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, I think it's called?
Yeah, saw something like that.
Okay. It's pretty like it's a pretty interesting look into the effects of social media. It interviews a whole bunch of guys who were right in the middle of all the evolution of the social media from Snapchat to Facebook. Like just these guys who were engineers and smart people trying to put together the social media for good ends, it sounds like. But as they saw it's shifting in its focus towards unhelpful ways, they're trying to raise up the flag of concern, saying, "Hey, we should address and talk about this." And in the absence of that, they said, "We're going to bow out of this and try to like work against this influence that you were describing. It's so negative. It's really worthwhile look. So consider
Take
checking
a
that
look at.
out. Social
Yeah, I
Dilemma.
will.
Yeah. So you say social media, especially because it facilitates miscommunication, which brings more of this kind of effect amongst people, as
Yeah.
opposed to being able to actually say, hey, let me hear from your perspective what this looks like so that I can make sure I'm understanding you correctly.
Mhm. Yep. I think there's like, for example, there's certain things that I might hear on social media, even being 17, almost 18. Yes, I'm older and I understand more, but there's still things on there that I see that I'm like, I don't know about this. That'll, you know, I'll ask friends, I'll ask my family themselves to give me a bit of more information on this and guide me in the right information. So there's
Mm-hmm.
never an age where you'll stop looking for the right information. Because people think like, oh, I'm an adult now. I understand what's right, what's wrong, what's true, and what isn't. But you can easily get manipulated from information.
Another thing that I was thinking about in relation to social media is my experience on there has been, for the most part, good. I've definitely had experiences on there where people will come on and, throw a lot more discouraging inputs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten to a place in my life where I can handle that. It doesn't affect me as much because it's kind of like, oh, whatever, you know. But I know for a lot of people, they struggle with that, right? They struggle with that element of participation in social media that is less than encouraging. And so I do feel for those individuals, Taha. I feel for them in the sense that it's almost like they are sitting ducks, you know, sort of being hit hard by these really unhelpful.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a good skill to have, and I even look into that too. As like, even though you get discouraging comments, you got to remember what you're doing. For example, TikTok. That does that make you happy? If it makes you happy and you're doing what you want to do, then you really shouldn't care about what other people think. But obviously, there's still people who struggle with that.
which I think ties into the mental health piece for the following reasons, because um, I know for the longest time in my own personal development, mental health wise, it was just coming to the acknowledgement that I'm a huge people pleaser. And being a people pleaser, I was living on other people's expectations for me. I was trying to think, okay, what would make other people happy? And then I'll try to fit that, regardless of what my thoughts or my convictions or my feelings were, right? I'd be putting myself always in second place. So having come to address that for me personally and moving away from the people pleasing tendencies, when I
It
get,
was. I was just gonna say I was there too. Well, it's
yeah,
like being a people pleaser and always helping people and everything, kind of putting myself
yeah.
and then and then I started to look into the mental health thing and all that, and I realized that like really I should put myself first. Like even though that sounds selfish, but like obviously your health is number one before anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. A huge part of this evolution for me has meant that I'm growing in self-confidence myself, which means that I'm okay disappointing other people now. Once upon a time, that was like freaked out about that, Taha. I was like, no, I can't disappoint anyone, right? I need to make everyone else of me happy. But now saying, here's my primary priority, and that's to make sure that intellectually, in my mind, I'm at peace, in my body, like I'm healthy. Only then can I be of help to other people because I'm looking after myself first. That built a huge foundation of confidence for me internally, so that now I could look at others and say, I'm sorry you're unhappy with my decision, but this is what the call that I have to make. This is the line that I have to draw. This is the boundary I need to implement, right? And so as a result, my mental health meant that I had to be okay with saying no to people, no to a lot of good options, no to making others happy at my expense.
Yeah.
And then that's really helped me now online so that when people are throwing their discouragements at me, I'm like, you may feel that way, but here's the line that I draw, and I'm quite
Yeah.
confident in what I'm doing, right?
Yeah, I can relate to you a lot on that one of being a people pleaser and then realizing that people are going to be upset no matter what. Nobody's going to be okay with your decision. There's always going to be hate, and that like you got to be able to say no. So I can definitely relate to you on that point.
Hmm. Have you ever gone back to Lebanon yet?
Yeah, I go back every 2 years for the
Oh
summer,
my.
every year or two.
Okay.
I was supposed to
Would-
go this year, but due to coronavirus, I wasn't
Uh,
able to.
every couple of years, your family has been able to go back together.
Yeah,
Okay, which I can see continues to enhance and solidify your cultural um, sort of uh, formulation, saying, "Here's my people, here's my land, here's our customs," that kind of thing.
exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's why I
And
love going back there because everybody there follows the same culture as you, and it's all kind of the same. You're with your people, so and
yeah,
it helps remind you of who you are and about your religion and culture.
would you say Lebanon is a developing country or a developed country?
Developing. We have probably one of the most corrupt governments there. And
Really?
actually, if you look in the news, um, they're trying on fixing the government, and there's been a revolution going on there. Um, so all that stuff. They have like
Yeah,
France government. They have the France government helping out, and so
yeah.
all that.
Is that helpful, the France government's input, or not really?
I feel like there's a difference of opinion
Okay.
there. Yeah, but there was revolution since last year, but after the big explosion that happened at the port, I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah,
Um,
yes.
at that point, people were that, and the dollar was expensive. So it was, coronavirus, economic crisis, and that explosion. People were fed up, so now they're trying to change the government. Hopefully, it will work this time.
I guess the reason I'm somewhat surprised that there is that level of corruption there is because I was under the impression that like the country for the most part, would you say is religious? Like is it like a religious state or no?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, there majority there is not like there is Muslims there a lot, but there is a lot of Christian Lebanese people who are there. So
Okay.
um, and there's Christian people in government or in certain aspects
Okay.
of career work that
Yeah.
bring a difference of opinion, which makes it hard to kind of come together. I think that's the one problem, having prime minister, president, and all those come together and agree on one thing, because all of them
Yeah.
have different beliefs, and so then they kind of split up, almost kind of like, I'd say kind of almost like two governments in one country kind of thing, I believe.
Sure. Okay. And I guess the part that I was surprised at, because maybe this is the wrong perception that I have, is that these leaders in government would have been religious. And so that's why I was surprised that there was corruption, but you're saying not necessarily so. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, they do all follow religion, but I think when it comes to the political game, it's all about politics. It's not about, a lot of the times you see in not just in the Middle East, in different countries where they look at they kind of put humans aside, they put religion aside, kind of, and they just play the political game. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. Huh. I think my country, Ethiopia, many other countries in Africa, many other countries that are developing seem to be struggling with the same plight, right? Of corruption at so many levels in government and the judiciary system. And so
Yep.
it just seems to continue to hold us back in our development or evolution. So it
Yeah,
makes me super thankful. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that has uh, I mean, that's why the UN, the United Nations, is here, but they're not even doing their right job in helping those undeveloped countries and those corrupt governments.
Hmm. It also makes me think about how thankful I am for countries like Canada, for example, or North
Mhm.
America, countries that open up their borders to say, come, have a new start to life again, and also this concept I don't think that is very well understood in our own countries of human rights and what that looks like, right? In reference to um, e- everyone equal and fair access because we're fellow human beings. It's one of the things I'm really thankful for after my time here in Canada. It's like it's a concept that's dear, but it's not well shared across all these other countries, right?
Yeah, I think with underdeveloped countries, one thing is human rights is something that they don't really focus on, that they need to, and we see that a lot around the world, and that's why I think we're very fortunate and lucky to be born and grew up here in such a fortunate country.
Yeah. Towards the end of my podcast, Taha, I usually make just a little bit of time to let my interviewee ask me a question. So this could be a question on anything in relation to curiosity or thoughts, perspectives. So let me give you that opportunity to throw me a question and say,
Um, it was like, I had a question for
yeah,
you. I'm trying to remember what that was. I thought about it. earlier. Um, One thing that I was one question is, so you do drive for Uber right now, and do you think that's where you're gonna continue to head on with Uber and social media, or do you think you know, do you ever think that, you know what, maybe this journey of Uber has to come to an end, or even just getting a higher position in Uber rather than just an Uber driver actually joining the executive team?
Great question. I am always looking for how I can expand what I am selling, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is
Yep.
this. I want to like I'm where I'm at right now, I did not see evolving. I was
Mhm.
just saying that in the previous recording of a podcast. Where I'm at, I didn't see like for another good decade. I thought I had to have to build my way up, right? But what the way I'm operating right now, this is not unfamiliar to me. I've been doing this for the past 2, 3 decades of my life. I really had a real gift for connecting with people along the way. It's just now I'm doing it in an intentional way for modeling to the world as best as I can what I'm doing because I feel like I experience so much happiness and rich engagement with my fellow human beings. So that's what my agenda is. How can I continue to model what this looks like for you guys to watch and see? So I'm always open for opportunities that continue to expand that ability. So, for example, if I were like some people have asked me, Taha, why don't you consider becoming like a limousine driver and having a private service? I'd be like, then I'd only be meeting just a small segment of society, but I want to reach everyone because I think what I have to share is I want for everyone. I don't want to put it as a premium price for only the rich people. I want those in lower socioeconomic places to those who work as homemakers to those who work in the president's office. Like I want everyone to have access to what I experience is something really beautiful. And so that's what I'm looking for is those opportunities that expand my reach. So that's why I love Uber right now. As far as how long I want to do this for, I think I want to do this for the time being until a point where, for example, this podcast can take off. And I like that podcast idea because it gives me more opportunity to talk to people,
Yep.
model what that
Yep.
looks like, and encourage others, not only to entertain them, but also to model for them, hey, this is what it could look like, and then to help them get to the point where they're feeling confident to write me a message saying, listen, ever since watching your content, I've been talking to other people on my commute on the train, for example, and I've gotten messages like that, or I've been more cheerful with, whoever I'm meeting along the way. And so that's the kind of influence or legacy I want to leave. So I'm heading towards making the podcast more of something I want to commit to long term because I find with that one there, I'll have that freedom, that scope of as wide as I can see to be able to share my insights and model what I think is really important.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think what you're doing is a really great thing. It really bringing people together and building confidence in people, and that just shows that, like, look, like we can turn this place around, like this kind of society around into
Mm-hmm.
this. And I ask about the Uber thing because a lot of people that I know, they either do Uber on part time, or they're like, oh, just do this for a period of time and stop. But
Sure,
from what I remember from your TikToks is that you haven't just been an Uber driver, correct? You bus driver, all these sort of things, right? Different drivers.
that's
What
right.
would you say your favorite one was?
My favorite
Driving.
job that I've done so far,
Yeah.
two of them stand out. Um, Actually, three of them. Okay, so I'll start off with my first real job after being a paper boy for many years was a bag boy at Safeway, a courtesy clerk is what we call ourselves. So I love that one
Yep.
because I got to meet so many members of society. I got to practice my social skills then, and the community I lived in, the city that I lived in was so gracious to me and they were so kind. They loved me in a very genuine way. I love that one. But I also loved being a teacher. Also, I taught English. I taught kids for many years, and I loved that. I loved making an impact in kids' lives in a huge way. I liked connecting in a really deep way, where I was like a stable sort of outside the family influence in their lives. I Love that opportunity to learn how to connect with them from young up all the way up to teens. And then I also really enjoyed my time as a pastor when I was a pastor of a church. Loved that opportunity to be pastor, even though I'm not a pastor anymore. It was just something that I felt really strongly about at the time. Um, and I enjoyed counseling. I enjoyed vision casting. It was something that I really resonated with. So those are like the three that I really enjoyed. And the consistent theme I see in all those was I was with people, sharing with them my perspectives, encouraging them their own experience, just sharing a lot of joy that I had on the inside. And I was like, I have so much to give. I've got so much love to give, and I want to to those around me.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's one thing that I love. I love me. Big thing for me is interacting with people. I'm a very social person,
Hmm.
and I love getting to meet new people and talking
Yeah,
to them and getting to know them.
yeah.
It's always nice to meet new people.
Taha, this has been a fantastic hour together with you. I'm so thrilled that I meet you face to face. This is the first time we're face to face, so I can
Yeah.
take down your username and put a personality and a face to it, which I love. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
Yeah,
taking the time to share about yourself and
of course. Pleasure.
some of your experiences in life. I think this has been very meaningful.
It was a pleasure. I enjoyed that. And I was always very excited. As soon as I heard you had started a podcast, I was like, that's number one thing. Because I've always kind of wanted to start one too. But I thought first step is to actually be on one. And I got to get you as my Uber driver one day. It's got to
I
happen.
know. Here's the thing. You are a lot, it's more realistic for you than most of my followers because they live in different parts of the world, where you and I are in the same city. So it's going
Yeah.
to be fantastic.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, my
Awesome.
friend,
Thank you.
happy Sunday to you.
You too. Happy Sunday.
Thank you again for taking the time. I'll talk to you again soon. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. See y'all later.
See ya. Bye.